Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is a morning update. Hey, what's going on, everybody? So we had Maria Farmer on yesterday for episode 2 of Her Story in Her Own Words. If you haven't checked that episode out yet, you definitely want to go back and download the episode and listen to what she has to say because, again, it's just explosive stuff. And really, it's just the tip of the iceberg. There is so much more that we need to learn, that we need to dig up, and that we need to expose within this case. And when brave people like Maria Farmer come forward and tell their story, it puts us on a path to doing that because it pulls the curtain back. We always talk about that here on the podcast, right? Pulling the curtain back and exposing what's going on in the dark. And Maria Farmer coming forward and speaking her truth and letting the audience know what was going on within the Epstein organization and what she experienced right from her, that's powerful testimony. So whenever we can do that, whenever we can hear from one of the survivors or somebody directly related to the Epstein case, it's always much more powerful than hearing it from a journalist or a content creator or a third party. And I'll tell you what, folks, another thing, it's amazing how everybody has rallied around Maria and her battle for cancer with the donations to her GoFundMe, et cetera, et cetera. Once again, you folks just prove how solid and top-notch all of you are. And it's apparent from the way the people who are invested in this case have rallied around the survivors like Maria, and especially now with the GoFundMe being set up by Virginia Roberts and some of the other survivors for Maria to battle cancer, you see all of the outpour of love and support that Maria has, and I can tell you for sure she is very grateful for it. So we're going to keep digging. We're going to keep shaking trees. We're going to keep kicking in doors, and we're going to keep looking for answers and demanding answers. And we're also going to keep demanding accountability from places like the New York Art Academy. There is zero chance somebody like Eileen Guggenheim should be the CEO of that board. She should not be on that board. She should not be involved at all. In fact, she should be slapped under a RICO investigation at this point. We talked about Eileen Guggenheim here on the podcast a while back, and it was all leading up to Maria eventually coming out and telling her story. Maria and I had talked in January for the first time, and she had told me everything that she's talking about now, and I was just blown away by what I had heard. And in coordination with her and talking with her, I decided to do that Eileen Guggenheim episode a while back, and I had a few people send me emails, not really, they weren't too sure where she fit into the story, and I cautioned patience and said all of the pieces will fall into place eventually. And now they have. Eileen Guggenheim is a reprehensible human being, in my opinion, and what she was involved with at that academy and what she did to move Maria in the direction of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell can never ever be forgiven, in my opinion, and there needs to be serious repercussions for somebody like Guggenheim who uses their status and their power to enable somebody like Jeffrey Epstein. A person like that should not be rewarded by having a seat on the board, being the president of the board of a place like New York Academy of Art. It just should never happen. So we've seen the movement with that already as well, with the petition being put into play, and it's gaining legs, right? It's an important part of the story, and a part of the story that nobody would have ever been aware of if Maria Farmer didn't come forward and talk about it. And you see, these people have relied on these girls having no voice for so long that they've gotten almost comfortable with the fact that they control the narrative. Well, we see that that's no longer the case. We see that the survivors are taking the narrative back and they're filling the holes, right, with the truth. And we see it time and time again with the survivors in this case, the bravery that they display as they get hit with setbacks or the road looks like it's going to be a rough ride. They don't get frustrated, or they don't get, I shouldn't say frustrated because I'm sure they do get frustrated, but they don't get to a point where they're willing to give up. They're in it for the long haul, and you see it time and time again. You know, a ruling like we saw with the 11th Circuit of Appeals. Of course, that's a setback, but they just keep trudging on and keep fighting because at this point in time, they know that finally, after all of these decades, people are paying attention to what's going on in this case, and people are starting to take notice of the way not only our government officials behave, but the way that so-called prosecutors behave. And there's a real look behind the curtain going on right now. And the more these stories get out, and the more they're prominently displayed by the media, and the more they're picked up by content creators who have a large reach, the better off the case will be. Because again, there's nobody who learns about this case who isn't outraged. I haven't met one person who has learned about this case who has not been outraged. Every single person I know. And that's not even hyperbole. That's the truth. Every person I know that knows the intricacies of this case and knows the ins and outs of this case and knows what occurred is absolutely shocked that there aren't arrests happening right now. So with that said, we're going to jump into our article today. And the article is from Bloomberg. And the author of the article is Edvard Peterson. Headline: Epstein victims dealt a setback as judge denies punitive damages. Two women who claim they were sexually abused by Jeffrey Epstein can't collect punitive damages from the sex offender's estate. A federal judge in Manhattan agreed with two executors of the estate that laws in New York and New Mexico don't allow the women to claim punitive damages on top of any compensatory damages for their injuries. So they can't get the punitive damages on top of the damages for their injuries, according to this judge. So they won't be able to slap the punitives on top and get the double dip here, according to the ruling by this judge in New York. The point of punitive damages is to punish and deter the perpetrator, and when he or she is dead, that purpose will no longer be served, U.S. District Judge Paul Egelmeyer said in two separate rulings this week. Again, I'm not a legalese kind of guy. I don't really know the laws inside and out or anything like that, but I don't like how when somebody like this, Jeffrey Epstein, say they die, right? And that just ends the case. They should be able to keep the case moving forward with Jeffrey Epstein being dead even. This is a unique kind of case, right? I think that there should be some sort of pathway for that to occur within the legal system. But again, why should the legal system be anything but confusing? Why should the legal system be anything but hard for people without money to navigate? They would never make it easy, right? Then they would lose their advantage. They would lose their ability to use those loopholes to screw the rest of us. The judge rejected the punitive damages claim made by a woman using the pseudonym Mary Doe on Tuesday, saying New York law doesn't allow it. He incorporated the reasoning Thursday in dismissing the claim of another woman who used the pseudonym Jane Doe 15. So this judge is pretty adamant about this, right? He's dismissed it two times now, two separate women, and it looks like there's no way that this judge is going to be moved on the punitive damages angle for these two survivors that are going after some funds from Jeffrey Epstein's estate. Jane Doe 15 argued she should be able to pursue punitive damages under New Mexico law where she claimed she was sexually assaulted. But the judge said New Mexico law, like in New York, doesn't allow it. Punitive damages can be as much as 10 times the amount of compensatory damages. Wow. So this is kind of interesting that this little blurb here, though. New Mexico law. Well, she says she was assaulted in New Mexico, right? And we know that the New Mexico authorities have not kicked open any sort of investigation. All the information that they've gained in New Mexico, they've passed on to the SDNY. So we have this girl here, Jane Doe 15, saying she was assaulted in New Mexico. What more do you need? New Mexico needs to get their shit together, folks. There's a reason I went down there. New Mexico is there is an absolute curtain of secrecy draped over Zorro Ranch and Jeffrey Epstein's activities within New Mexico. I mean, are you kidding me right now? And if you think that Jane Doe 15 was the only girl that was assaulted there, well, I don't know what to tell you. While we respectfully disagree with the ruling, we intend to pursue the estate for the full measure of our clients' underlying damages, which are extensive. Gloria Allred, a lawyer for the two women, said in an email. Well, there you go. Gloria Allred's involved, huh? Shocking. Just shocking. And it makes me sad, honestly. I really wish that these survivors that are working with Gloria Allred or Lisa Bloom would have different legal representation. Not because I know any better, right? It's just, every time I see the name Gloria Allred or Lisa Bloom, I roll my eyes. And that was before we learned what we learned about Gloria Allred from Maria Farmer. In the best of times, I thought Gloria Allred was a grifter. Now, after hearing what Maria Farmer had to say about her, well, I think she's a lot worse than that. And in my opinion, Gloria Allred should not be anywhere near a case like this. This is a case where credibility is so important. This is a case where everything must be ironclad. You can't give people like Indike and Kahn and Dershowitz from the shadows, probably, any room to wiggle or maneuver themselves out of this. This must be ironclad, and it must be the sort of case where they have no ability to use outside factors as reasons for them to get the case dismissed, etc., etc. Epstein killed himself, allegedly, in prison in August after he was charged with sex trafficking of minors. Shortly before his death, he transferred his fortune to a trust set up in the U.S. Virgin Islands. The estate last year said it would create a fund to compensate his victims. Well, we know that. We know that the fund has been created. But what we don't know is when the money from that fund will be administered. We know there's a big battle going on in the courtroom between Denise George and Darren Indike and Kahn, and they are really going back and forth with the claims of neither one being suitable to pursue the case against the estate or defend the case for the estate. And we see all the articles coming out where there is so much gridlock in that respect of that aspect of the case that they've asked the judge to step in and make a ruling down there. So again, when Epstein set that estate up, set up that trust in the Virgin Islands, and he did the will and all of that, it was a calculated move. It wasn't something he was, willy-nilly just doing. There was a reason he chose to do it in the Virgin Islands. And you see that now as we watch the case wind its way through the courts. Attorneys for the two women and for the estate didn't immediately respond to requests for comment on the judge's rulings. And that doesn't shock me. Seems like every time we read one of these articles, it's the same deal, right? Oh, the attorneys didn't respond to questions, or so-and-so didn't respond to emails for questions, and nobody ever wants to add any context to any of this stuff, right? These lawyers are holding everything close to the vest, and they're getting ready to do what lawyers do. And that is try and screw the rest of us most of the time. All right, folks. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. You can also find me on that disgusting cesspool we call Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All right, everybody, I will be back later on with the Daily Drop. I hope you all have an amazing day.